Shalom, brothers and sisters. Shalom, brothers and sisters. Giving honor and praise unto the Most High, the Creator and the Maker of heaven and earth. My name is Yeshaya Yisrael of the tribe of Dan of the nation of Israel. This particular presentation we wanted to do before, but we are trying to and going to do this. Most High blessed tonight. This presentation is about the Black presence in the Old Testament. Now, when we speak in regards, say, of the Old Testament, we're talking about the part of the Bible that goes, brothers and sisters, from the book of Genesis in the KJV version, all the way, if we will, to the book of Malachi. Okay? So, what we want to point out, brothers and sisters, in this particular matter is that none of us know everything, and we are open, brothers and sisters, to constructive criticism. All right. If there is anyone who is able to let me know if I can be heard, please press a 1. All right. Because I'm not able to hear myself. So I ask the people who do respect the brother enough to take out the time to listen that the sound can be heard and so forth. Okay. Thank you for that. Now, shalom, honor to the Most High, the Creator of heaven and earth. This presentation will focus on the Black presence in the Old Testament. We will go from the prophecy of Deuteronomy 28 with history and reasoning and explanation, and then to external sources regarding the Israelites. Please subscribe to the channel. A matter to discuss. The true Israelites, according to the Bible, were scattered. Now, what we're going to do, brothers and sisters, is going along with this, is read in the book of Deuteronomy 28. We're going to go to Deuteronomy 28, verse 64, and see what it says in this particular matter. All right? And the Lord shall scatter thee among all people, from the one end of the earth even unto the other, and there you shall serve other gods, which neither thou nor thy fathers have known, even wood and stone. Now, one of the things we want to point out is that earth, in the biblical understanding, right, is the earth is the dry land. When you go to Genesis chapter 1, all right, it says in the book of Psalms that he spread the earth above the waters. So in Exodus 20, it says that he created the earth, the sea, and all that in them is. So when we speak about earth, we want to point out that the earth, the Eretz, in the Hebrew is the Yabashah. The Yabashah, brothers and sisters, representing the dry land. Now, in Deuteronomy 28, verse 64, it says, the Most High will scatter thee, Israel, among all people, from the one end of the earth even to the other, and there you shall serve other gods, which neither you nor your fathers have known, even wood and stone. Now, you will have to understand what is an Israelite. Is a person who is a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the scriptures. All right, now these are the patriarchs that came from the land of Chaldea and migrated to the land of Canaan or Canaan. Okay, we're going to talk about that in this particular presentation. Now, brothers and sisters, so when it says neither you, meaning the Israelites of those day and time, under Moses, right? Know your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob have known, even wood and stone. Wood and stone is things that we are not supposed to be worshiping. That when people take it and make it a carved image that and bow down and pray to it, he or she has then made that his or her idol. All right. That is what we in Israel are not supposed to do. All right. So let's understand that for reason and purposes. Let us go, if we will, to Jeremiah chapter 31. All right. We're going to go to the book of the prophet Jeremiah chapter 31. We're going to start in verse 10. All right. And it says on this wise, Jeremiah 31, verse 10. Thank you for the time. Hear the word of Yah, O ye nations, and declare it. And the owls afar off, and say, he that scattered Israel will gather him, and keep him as a shepherd doth his flock. So, brothers and sisters, when we get into this kind of portion and into this kind of matter right here, we know good and well and understand, brothers and sisters, that Israel, the people, the children of Israel, was scattered. The scattering or the diaspora or the dispersion of the Israelites began to happen heavily during and after the era of Solomon, as we've been pointing out on this channel. All right. So now Solomon in his prayer said, if Israel be carried away far to the land of the enemy, that's in the book of First Kings chapter 8. So we want to talk about who were the enemies, who did the carrying, and who was carried. All right. Let's go to Zechariah chapter 7, verse 13. So we can gain some understanding of what we're talking about. We are in, brothers and sisters, the prophet Zechariah chapter 7, verse 13, and it says, therefore it's come to pass that as he cried, and they would not hear, so they cried, and I would not hear, saith the Most High of hosts. But I scattered them with a whirlwind among the nations, whom they knew not. Thus the land was desolate after them, that no man passed through nor returned, for they laid the pleasant land desolate. Now, brothers and sisters, when it says that they laid the pleasant land desolate, that's the land of Israel right there. Zechariah was during the era of the time when the Achaemenid or the Medo-Persian Empire was ruling. In this particular time, when you start talking about Darius the first and so forth and so on, who was the successor, right? So these are things that we brothers and sisters want to point out for edification purposes, if we will, right? Now, let us go on, brothers and sisters, into this particular matter. I want to take the time and share the video with some brothers and sisters, and so we will then from that point be moving on. Thank you again for the time, brothers and sisters. All right, let us go on. So now you have it to where Israel was prophesied about being scattered in the book of Deuteronomy 28. Then you see the scattering already happening after and during the era of Solomon. Then by the time you get to Jeremiah, you see Israel's already being scattered. Then in the time of Zechariah, it says about Israel already being scattered. All right. So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to point out for edification purposes, if we will. All right. So let us go on, brothers and sisters, in this particular matter, all right, and continue. And so, Rogers versus Williams, all right. J. Rogers stated in his book, 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, that the characters of the Bible are largely Negroes. He lived from 1880 or 1883 to some to 1966. He was of Jamaican parents. So, brothers and sisters, J. A. Rogers, who wrote the book 100 Amazing Facts About the Negro, right? He spoke about saying that the characters of the Bible are largely Negroes. Now, when we say characters, we're talking about the people within it, okay? Now, Chancellor Williams, in his book called Destruction of Black Civilization, he stated that the Hebrews were white, and he lived from 1893 to 1992. So, brothers and sisters, we seem, and I say this in respect, we seem to kind of like have an issue or a problem to a certain extent, right? Here you got J.A. Rogers stating that the characters of the Bible are Negroes. Then you have another scholar that is saying in his book, Destruction of Black Civilization, that the ancient Hebrews were white. So, brothers and sisters, how then can that such be the case? The children of Israel were not so. But the reason why I pointed out what Chancellor Williams stated is to show that apparently some are paid, or some get recognition, or some get a clearance, or some get popularity, or some get fame, or what have you, to sit there and actually try to state the aspect of saying that the Hebrews or the Jews of the ancient world were white. We have black and white scholars that disagree with that kind of statement. All right, so this is something we want to point out for edification purposes. Let's go on, if you will, in discussing this matter. Explanation. Deuteronomy 28, verse 62 says Israel will be left few in number. In Deuteronomy 28:64, right, it says, quoted, Israel will be scattered. If a person does not claim to be Israelite, it's hard to understand Deuteronomy 28:64 because it distinctly says Israel will serve gods that they nor their fathers knew. But if you don't know who the fathers, the Abot, were, the ancestors of Israel were, you can't understand Deuteronomy 28, verse 64. So, brothers and sisters, in light of that particular matter of what we're talking about, you can't sit there and state, while you don't claim to be an Israelite, nor do you state who the Israelites are, even if you don't say that you are part of the Israelite people, you cannot understand Deuteronomy 28:64. All right. So this is something that we want to point out for edification purposes. It goes on to say, the persons who say that the white Jews are the true Israelites and say the blacks in the West who don't subscribe to Jesus as Lord are Antichrist also forget that the white Jews don't subscribe to Jesus as Lord. It's a ploy against the true Israelites is what it is. So let me explain the point in me making that comment right there. You would have it to where people who are deeming themselves as Christians, and they believe that the European Jews that you see over in the land of Israel are the true house of Israel. But then Israelites who are Old Testament based are said to be, quote, Antichrist, while the Christian is holding up the European Jew who also don't believe in Jesus as their Lord and Savior in the face of the, quote unquote, Black Hebrew Israelite. When you hear people talk about the term that is coined as Black Hebrew Israelite, no camp calls themselves Black as a name. We use the aspect of this kind of topic because we want to reach out to our people who may identify as so, just as much as when we do these presentations, ani medabel ba'angali. Lo ani basadir et hashi'ur haze be'ibrit rak. I don't only sit there and speak upon this, say in Hebrew, because that's not going to be beneficial to those who are understanding English. It's logic at that particular case. All right. I remember times in which people would ask me why I'm Old Testament based, while they're saying that the European Jew, who also don't believe in Jesus Christ, and so forth and so on, is the real Jew. So I remember having to ask, well, when you talk to these European Jews, do you sit there and ask them the questions that you ask me? Or is it a thing that the unity between the European converted Jews that you see in the land of Israel and this average Christian is that they both disagree, but that they both agree with saying that the black man in America cannot be the true Israelite? That's where their link is. So even if they disagree on certain things, there still is a commonality in other things. All right. So let's understand that for that reason. Let's go on to the next slide. The original 50 Cent and the matter regarding our people. Deuteronomy 28:65 says that Israel will not have rest for the sole of their feet among the nations who carried them captive. It is common knowledge that the people who were enslaved worked as slaves from can to can't. Deuteronomy 28:65, right, says that the people will be given a trembling heart. This means that the true Israelites, while after being scattered and given new gods that their ancestors did not know, will be scared to make moves, to do things. To this day, there are communities of blacks who won't enter the United States, yet it is a black neighborhood that is gentrified. Since when did, say, white men, women, and children walk in what is referred to as Fort Greene, Brooklyn? Now, put the terminology stick up, robbed them, because those who are familiar with that part of area of Brooklyn, and this is why I do the picture of the original 50 Cent, who was known as a murderer and a thief and a robber during the 1980s. You understand? Brothers and sisters, our neighbors have been gentrified while in the land of our captivity. So when we read in Deuteronomy 28, verse 65, let us read that. As we read Deuteronomy 28:64, we want to read Deuteronomy 28:65, and let us see what it says in this particular case, brothers and sisters. And among these nations you shall find no ease, neither shall the sole of your foot have rest, but the Most High shall give thee there a trembling heart, failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind. Brothers and sisters, even today in after the year 2000, when they start talking about the hood movies and the smack DVDs and world star DVDs and all of those kind of things of today, When we begin to see how we as a people tore down our own communities in the 1980s and in the 1990s, that will cause the sorrow of mind. When we begin to see how we have not done right by one another, that will sit there and cause sorrow of mind. When we begin to see how much animosity, jealousy, sadness, envy, hatred, or those things that you read of in the Willie Lynch letter that was imposed upon us as a people. And the reason, sadly, in many cases, why we implement that is because we have a fear of being quote unquote racist. So by acting against our own, we feel that we have then gained the right to tell others, see, I'm not racist. I hate my own as well. And so this is the kind of thing where it says a filling of eyes in Deuteronomy 28:65, because among these nations, we don't have any aspect of where our vision can go. With your eyes is what you see with. Where do you see yourself 3 years, 4 years, five? Do you have a 10-year plan? And so forth and so on. In many cases, it's not like that. It is generally said, now being the year 2021, I remember hearing last year in 2020 that by 2050, 30 years, now 29 years from now, black people be bankrupt. So, brothers and sisters, where is our vision, our goal, and where do we see things? These are things we want to emphasize while our people, in celebrating the understanding of Black History Month, we want to sit there and gain the people's attention now to talk about this kind of matter. All right. What you're seeing there on the right-hand side, brothers and sisters, is a picture, as pointed out, of the original 50 Cent who came out of Brooklyn, who sadly was not good toward his own people. All right. So that's something we want to point out in that particular case. Let's go on. The matter with Deuteronomy, meaning Deuteronomy 28 and farmers, it says this. In Deuteronomy 28, verse 15, cursed shall you be in the city, and cursed shall you be in the field. Deuteronomy 28, verse 46 says, all these curses shall come upon thee, pursue thee, overtake thee, and they the curses shall be upon thee for a sign. So we must see who has the sign of these curses. Now, it says here, the number of black farmers in America peaked in 1920 when there were 949,889. Today, meaning dated to 2019 when this article came out, today the country is 3.4 million total farmers. Only 1.3 or 45,508 are black, according to new figures from the U.S. Department of Agriculture released this month. They own a mere 0.52% of America's farmland. Now, in 2021, you know who owns much of the farmland? Is Bill Gates in America. Brothers and sisters, black farmers own less than 0% of America's farmland. By comparison, 95% of U.S. farmers are white. So when we can read in the scriptures and it says, cursed shalt thou be in the city, cursed shalt thou be in the field, brothers and sisters, the farmland that we have as a people doesn't even sit there and amount over to 2% in the whole United States. So these are things, though it's not the happiest, that we want to sit there and show out to our people to let them know and blow the horn so we can begin to see where we need to go as a people and what we need to do. Let's move on. The matter of land in Deuteronomy, meaning Deuteronomy 28. Deuteronomy 28, verse 21 says the following. The Lord will make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until that's consumed thee from off the land, whether thou goest to possess it. Right? It says Israel will be plucked from the land where they go to possess. So a sign is being landless, having no land. Brothers and sisters, even when I was in the South, right? There are black people who do have land and so forth and so on. But by comparison to, and I say this in no disrespect, the black people who deal with goats and sheep compared to the amount of white people that got horses and cows, the disparaging number is still there. The amount of people who have farmland in the South, even when I was down there, is mostly Caucasian. and we are the tail and not the head in that particular case. You understand? Black land loss in the United States refers to the loss of land ownership and rights by Black people residing or farming in the United States. In 1861 and 1862, we want to highlight that or bold type that, the United States government passed the Morrill and Homestead Acts, which were intended to give the land grants to white Americans for colleges and those seeking land to farm. These acts were also accompanied by offers of subsidies to facilitate the acquisition and use of the land. As slavery was not abolished in the United States to 1865, right? Many enslaved and free blacks were unable to benefit from these acts. So now you had black people that were sharecroppers. Do you know when the black sharecroppers were? These were people who were free during slavery and after slavery who were still farming. So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to sit there and point out. Even when they start talking about Anthony Johnson and he being a free black person who had farmland. Anthony Johnson of Virginia, he passed away in 1670. 1670. He passed away in 1670. And when he passed away, the government of Virginia took his land. All right. So these are things that we want to sit there and point out, brothers and sisters, for reason and purposes. Okay. I thank the people who joined on, Ibriya Yisrael, servants of Yahweh. And I thank you for joining on as I see Shalom and to the people within the chat. All right. This presentation was supposed to have been done yesterday, but due to certain circumstances, we're now doing it tonight. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Thank you. A matter of a brother killed. Deuteronomy 28, verse 25 says that Israel will be smitten before the enemies and shall be a horror. The King James Version has removed to all the kingdoms of the earth. What were the kingdoms of the earth that encountered Israel? Assyria, 733 to 612 BCE. Babylon, 605 to 539 BCE. Persia, 539 to 331 BCE. Greece, 331 to 146 BCE. Rome, 160 BCE to 325 AD. Byzantine, 285 to 1400 AD. Portugal and Spain, 1441 to 1880. The Israelites were hated by those kingdoms. Let us not forget that the people of Ishmael or the Ishmaelites hated the Israelites as well. The people of Ishmael or the Ishmaelites refer to the Israelites as the stubborn people of the book. Now, in the doctrine of Islam, which is fundamentally the teachings later on of the nation of Ishmael, right? They have in the Quran, when you go in chapter 62 of the Quran, different snippets about Israelites being in part the rebellious people of the book, that they were given the revelation of the Torah and that they actually rebelled against it. In the Quran, chapter 17, verse 14 and 15 in particular, it says that in the Quran that we, whoever this we are, right, we send out an army and an emissary against the children of Israel who went against the laws of God. That is in the Quran, chapter 17, verse 14 and 15. Those who are familiar and understand what the jihaduma or the jihad, pluralized, which is referred to as a holy war, in many cases was waged against people of the Israelites that scattered into Africa. So when we read, brothers and sisters, about the aspect of wood and stone, you got the wood of Christianity and the stone of Islam, two of the biggest religions on the earth that our people worshiping gods of work of men's hands have now embraced. And so these are things we want to point out, and there's no disrespect intended, is no slander intended, but we want to point this out while our people's ear is attentive regarding what is referred to as Black History Month. Now, in Deuteronomy 28, verse 25, the Lord will cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies. Thou shalt go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them, and shall be removed, which the Hebrew says za'awa, which means a horror unto all the kingdoms of the earth. Now, brothers and sisters, in the Hebrew of that, where the King James V has removed, it says za. Za'awa, all right, inside of the Hebrew itself. And brother, what that means emphatically is a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. When you go to the book From Babylon to Timbuktu by Rudolf Winsor, it states there that when the Israelites eventually migrated to Western African civilizations and countries, that they were hated upon. The Israelites that was inside of Rome eventually were kicked out of Rome because they was making proselytes in Italy. When our people move into a neighborhood, they either try to get our people by buying them out of the neighborhood or they themselves move from it. This has happened in East New York, Brooklyn. When you watch, for instance, the movie Goodfellas, right? And they show the sign of East New York, Brooklyn in 1955, mainly being like Caucasian or Italian. By 1975 and later on 85, it was black. The Italians that moved out when the black people, we're going to keep the language clean, moved in. It's the same thing that happened with Rochdale Village in Queens. It's the same thing that happened, brothers and sisters, in Vineyard, which they now call Flappers Gardens. And I'm sure it happened in other places, but coming out of New York, I definitely can name and know places of New York where our people began to move in, the other people sat there and moved out. And residing, brothers and sisters, back in New York, you understand, Harlem has been gentrified to when, after the situation now, you had it when Bill Clinton was in there in the 1990s, our people sadly thinking that that was a great thing. It was not a great thing. Brothers and sisters, they rose up and rose up and rose up on the rent and everything like that, and then tried to sit there and get the people moved from out of Harlem, displaced them in the Bronx, and then many people wound up going to Charlotte, North Carolina. Many people in the South is because of gentrification that happened in New York and what happened in Newark, New Jersey. You understand? When they trying to push them out of there, push them out of Jersey City and Hoboken and wanted to sit there and move them away from the neighborhood. So when we can see in Deuteronomy 28 chapter, it says being a horror to all the kingdoms of the earth, we can begin to see what that is talking about. When you move in, they either want you to move out or they want to move out from you. So let us go on, brothers and sisters, and show what we're talking about. And as we see there, one of the many times a brother is slain, and we have no power to stand before our enemies. Sadly, as it states in the scriptures, these are some of the things that we talk about for it to be shown, as it says in Deuteronomy 28:46, as a sign. All right, let's go on, brothers and sisters, in this particular case. All right. Deuteronomy 28:25 says, Israel shall flee 7 ways before the enemies. Deuteronomy 28, verse 26 says this, and thy carcass shall be meat unto all the fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth, and no man shall fray them away. And the carcass of Israel shall be meat unto the fowls of the air and the beasts of the earth. From the era of Rome, using Israelites in gyms as beast fighters, to the European people using black babies as alligator bait. Our people, the Israelites, were scattered after fleeing from our enemies. Then our carcasses fed to beasts. There was no funeral. The scriptures never calls Israelites messianic or non-messianic. Deuteronomy 28, verse 28 says Israel will be smitten with blindness. Blindness is what causes you to not see. So, brothers and sisters, when we start talking about open up your eyes and wake up, it means that come from the blindness and come from being in the slumber and the sleep. In the book of Isaiah, side note, if you will, we're going to go, if we will, to the book of Isaiah, chapter 52. All right? For those who are following along, thank you for that. Isaiah 52, verse 1. Awake, awake, put on thy strength, O Zion. Put on thy beautiful garments, O Jerusalem, the holy city. Verse 2. Shake thyself from the dust. Arise and sit down, O Jerusalem. Loose thyself from the bands of thy neck, O captive daughter of Zion. So, brothers and sisters, in Isaiah 52, when we just read, and it distinctly says, awake, awake, and then it says, shake yourself from the dust, put on your beautiful garments. Brothers and sisters, shake from the yoke of your neck, O daughter of Zion. The brothers and the sisters, we have been oppressed. We know this. We know good and well what has happened. We know it says in Jeremiah chapter 6 that they have healed the hurt of the daughter of my people slightly by saying shalom, shalom, wa ain't shalom, by saying peace, peace, and there is no peace. You understand? I remember of situations when it was just like, oh, they just hate on the black man, but the black woman is okay. No, they done sat there and done shown sisters getting shot, beat up, and all kinds of stuff by the law enforcement, and so forth and so on. You understand what I mean? We as a people are under attack. So the thing that we have to do, already knowing this, is one, return back to the Most High. Let's throw that in the scriptures. Let's go to Psalms chapter 81. If we will, we're gonna, as we read, it's Isaiah chapter 52. Let us go to Psalm 81 and see what this says, brothers and sisters, for edification purposes. All right. And it says the following. Thank you, brothers and sisters. We are in Psalms 81, verse 10. I am Yah, thy power, which brought thee out of the land of Egypt. Open thy mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people would not hearken to my voice, and Israel were none of me. So I gave them up to their own heart's lust, and they walked in their own counsels. Oh, that my people had hearkened to me, and Israel had walked in my ways. I should soon have subdued their enemies and turned my hand against their adversaries. So, brothers and sisters, our adversaries are over us because we are not hearkening unto the Most High. This is what they want to make sure that we as a people do not come back to. And even within Israel, who know themselves as so, the whole messianic and non-messianic thing, that's garbage. The Most High didn't call us neither one of those names. You understand? Psalms chapter 4 says the Most High reserved those that which is godly. So Israel has to be like the Most High. Not saying that the Most High came as a man and God became manly. We as men and women have to be godly, not God becomes manly. And so these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to sit there and talk about and emphasize for edification purposes. Now, in the meme here that I got, yes, on Facebook, it says, when I ask my people what's their nationality according to the Bible, Isaiah 1 verse 3, the ox knoweth his owner, and the donkey his master's crib. But Israel does not know. My people do not consider. You don't consider that that land in the east is peopleless and we are landless. We don't consider the fact that many of our people, when they see two digits, they read it wrong in English because we already are a people who our language goes from right to left and not automatically left to right. It is a lack of consideration that our people are the minority and are called so even in politics, even in a society. When they talk of quote minorities, they are telling you that you are a minor. That's what you tell your children when you don't want them to act out of place. When you want your children to stay in line, you remind them, you know, you're a minor, right? And that's exactly what the nations are doing. Was they're treating us like we would treat our children. Like you need to sit there, remember your age, you acting out of contact. So these, just like we checked our children, so are we sadly getting checked as grown men and women by the nations. Like stay in line, kid, that kind of thing. So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to point out for edification purposes. Let's go on, if we will, to the next slide. A matter of blindness and willful wickedness. Deuteronomy 28, verse 29 says that Israel will grope at noonday and shall not prosper in their ways. What are we doing for progress? What do we contribute to economic factors? We are the oppressed and spoiled. Deuteronomy 28, verse 29. And let us read that. And it says, And thou shalt grope at noonday, as the blind gropeth in darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways. And thou shalt only be oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. So, brothers and sisters, when they sit there and try to tell you, well, you got a job, just be happy. When, even as the movie Queen pointed out, that the black soldiers was making less money than the white soldiers. When, brothers and sisters, when you are going for a loan for a car or so from the bank, if your address and your zip code matches in the hood or the ghetto or so forth, they are more likely to decline you to take that loan because they say your car is in a higher risk area of being robbed. These are things that once you get into business and everything, you begin to sit there and see what the difference is and how we are treated and perceived and dealt with and so forth and so on. So these are things we want to point out. All right. Deuteronomy 28 verse 30 says, Israel will build houses and not dwell in them, shall plant a vineyard and not use the fruit thereof. Who built America? We did. Did you know that it was a black man that designed and patented the houses that you see in Beverly Hills? Did you know that both the first and the White House, because the original White House was burnt in the 17th century by the British, that both of them were built by black people? Did you know, brothers and sisters, that it was our labor that sat there and built the courthouses that you see in Georgia? But brothers and sisters, in 1857, Taney straight up said that the white man don't have to respect the rules or the rights of a black man in the matter of Dred Scott. This is after the slaves, the black people, built the White House. Did you know, in part of my language, that there was a town in Virginia called Niggerfoot, which they try to now call Negro Foot, so that way it won't seem as harsh or disrespectful, but your spirit is still the same, regardless of how you're changing the terminology. You understand? So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to point out. Did you know that, as pointed out on this channel in the past, that Mississippi did not sit there and give their ratification papers of slavery until 2013? That means less than 10 years ago, brothers and sisters, Mississippi was still legally a slave state. Did you know that? So these are things that we want to sit there and point out for edification purposes. All right. It goes on to say this. Who built the Caribbean? We did. Did you know that Barbados, or one of the Caribbean islands, pardon me if it's not Barbados, just recently are discussing and getting rid of the Queen of England as their head? This is 2021, brothers and sisters. And many of the Caribbean islands are still subjugated by the French and by the English. Did you know that when slavery legally was over in the United States, that the government paid the slave masters for now their loss of labor people? So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to sit there and point out for edification purposes. All right. Now, it also goes on to say that Haiti pays French due to independence. Now, when this presentation was first uploaded and so forth, that has changed within the past 5 years. So they don't really pay, say, as much or at all to France for being free. But there was a time that France was getting paid by the Haitian government for fighting for their liberty under the era of Toussaint Louverture, under the era of Dessalines, and so forth and so on. You understand? So these things, brothers and sisters, we want to point out. And let's go on. Now, why do I put the picture from there of the thing from Paid in Full in the movie, right? Because as it says there, willful wickedness. This is a movie that came out, say, in 2002 called Paid in Full. And in it, it's showing the people as drug dealers, criminals, murderers. So let's understand this. In 2002, right? The movie Paid in Full came out showing how black people were destroying their own community in Harlem. In 2007, the movie American Gangster came out about Frank Lucas and the wickedness that he did in Harlem among his own people. So here we have brothers and sisters, movie after movie, showing how we destroyed our own community. Then brownstones in Harlem is now going to the Europeans or the Caucasians or white people. See, this right here is what was already being put in place. So that way we'll be sit there and be seen as the minority, which sadly, many of us perpetrate that same image. We want to sit there and change that. That's why earlier I read Isaiah, where it distinctly says, brothers and sisters, shake loose from the dust. You understand? Let us go on, if we will. Deuteronomy 28, verse 30, right? And the record left in History of Slavery by Susan Everett shows that our people had masks put on their faces so we can't eat what was grown. Who has the sign of being cursed in the city and the field? Brothers and sisters, what you're looking at right there on the right-hand side is an image of what happened in slavery in the Caribbean when they will put a mask on a person's face so they can't sit there and eat the fruit that was being grown. They can't benefit from the plants that was being grown. That's something that happened with us. All right. So, and it was also done, brothers and sisters, said in, if we will, the United States. This is how we were treated, if we will. Let's go on. A matter of dividing the family. Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse 32 says that the sons and daughters of Israel will be given to another people. This means that not all people are the same. The description here, the description how this will be done is your eyes shall look and fear with longing for them all day long, and there shall be no might in your hand. In describing how families were separated during slavery, we know that the parents were powerless to get their children back. Who has the sign of broken families? I recently was talking to a good friend of mine, and we were talking about how people are meeting up with relatives even after the year 2000 that they didn't know. Meeting an aunt, meeting a cousin, meeting a sister, meeting a brother, meeting so forth and so on, relatives, because the family situation has been broken up. My younger sister spoke about going on a thing called 23andMe in order to sit there and aspect of relatives and so forth. What sadly our black people have done is continued the same thing that was done in slavery of just being the lady in the buck, or as they say, the man in a wrench. You saw an example of that in the movie Roots when he says, well, we're going to sit there and see, we're going to get permission for you to make the beast. They used to have to sit there and get permission in order to sit there and make a child in many cases. You understand? And then when the baby was born, they would sit there and sell the child from one plantation or so to the other. You understand? There is a book out, brothers and sisters, and it's written by a sister. And that book is called Slavery with White Women in the South. The white women were the slave mistresses / masters, and how they participated in the breaking up of the family, and how black people used to come in from the field and then sit there and see the European women counting the money, but then they don't find their children because the children were already sold. These are things, brothers and sisters, that sadly happen and is documented in the history of this country. This knowledge is not new, might be new to some people, but it is what it is. But we want to sit there and still bring this out to our brothers and sisters. So what we're seeing right here in this is right here, the child, mother pleading. This is a picture painting, and the child there, and how the family was sitting up there and being separated. As it says sadly in Deuteronomy 28, verse 32, it says, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people. Did you know, brothers and sisters, that the football player Lawrence Taylor had a son that he couldn't control or so, and his son wound up joining a gang called the Crips, your eyes shall look with feeling for them all day long, and it shall be no might in the power of your hand. You understand? So what we have to do is get the family structure back, brothers and sisters, like it says in the book of Malachi about the fathers being united with the sons and the sons to the fathers. You understand? That is to say, the children being united with their ancestors, their parents, your immediate ancestors. You know, these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to sit there and point out for edification purposes. So when we talked about the signs and why we say biblically and the black presence in the Old Testament, this prophecy, as we see in Deuteronomy 28, is something that, as they say about you just can't write that or make that up. This is not something that you can just sit there and just make up just to sit there and to make yourself seem like you are special in the earth. You understand? Because there was a reason why our people were kept from reading. There's a reason why the Torah is part of what they call the Old Testament. That's why I emphasize in these presentations the Old Testament. Don't read the old, stay with something different. They didn't want us to sit there and crack this book open and sit there and read this. Did you know that everybody that rose up and did a great or successive slave rebellion know how to read? Denmark Vesey, Nat Turner, Gabriel Prosser, they all knew they was going to die for what they were doing, but they still had that heart and that courage to go up against their oppressors. So these are things, brothers and sisters. Now, when people try to say, "Oh, you're a Bible thumper," and blah, 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 or so forth and so on, there is no other record. Correct me if I'm wrong. You can go from the walls of Karnak in Egypt. You can go to the Kivra Nagast of Ethiopia. You can go to the Enuma Elish Asuma. But if you're not able to sit there and show why you're saying in your documentation signs and wonders, signs and experiences in history on why you say what you say, then the whole thing just has to be re-examined. Let's go, if we will, brothers and sisters, and read Deuteronomy 28:46. It says this, brothers and sisters, and they, meaning the curses, and they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. So, brothers and sisters, when they start talking about spiritual Israel, there's no such thing as spiritual Israel, brothers and sisters. The book here in the scriptures is talking emphatically and realistically about the seed of the house of Israel. It's not talking about bloodline. A lot of Israelites do talk about, say, oh, the blood, but it's not the blood, it's the seed line, because you put the seed in earth, and whatever that seed is comes out of the earth, providing the seed is not a dud. You understand? But you can put blood in the earth and nothing will come up out of that. So seed and blood are two different things. So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to emphasize for edification purposes. Let's go on. A matter of Deuteronomy and the reality movie. Deuteronomy 28, verse 34 says, "You shall be mad. This mad is crazy at the sight which thine eyes shall see." Who sees movies portrayed their people and go out upset, touched, and depressed? You know, when they had that movie, Harriet Tubman, people sat there and walked out the movie theater when Harriet Tubman was called the B word. Did you know that in that movie Django, when they had the black woman being transported by the wheelbarrow, that people just couldn't sit there and take it at that point? Did you know, brothers and sisters, that in the movie Mandingo that came out back in the 1970s, there were people who were sitting up there saying that that should not even sit there and be shown? When you sit there and show, brothers and sisters, about what happened with us as a people, is something in many cases that we don't even care to see. Because as Devarim or Deuteronomy 28 verse 34 states, "So thou shalt be mad for the sight which thine eyes shall see." So in many cases, we don't even want to sit there and see that. Now, what you're looking at there on the right-hand side, brothers and sisters, comes from the movie Boys in the Hood. You understand? And what this particular scene is talking about is how crazy, how sad the situation, say, in the hood is, to where he was just reacting emotionally, if you will, for those who are familiar with the movie. All right. And so this is something, brothers and sisters, that just came out in the 1990s. We're talking just a little or so 20 years ago. Some of us remember that. So let us go on, if you will, for edification purposes. A matter of being reclassified as a people. Deuteronomy 28, verse 37 says, that shall become an astonishment, a proverb and a byword among all the nations, whither the Lord shall lead you, a byword, and often used phrase. That's what the Israelites became, a phrase. The phrase being Negro, Coon, Black, West Indian, African American. Deuteronomy 28, verse 43 says, Israel shall be the tail and not the head, and will be borrowers who don't lend. Who is at the bottom of the economic rung? These are things we're pointing out, brothers and sisters. Who is at the bottom of the economic run? Now, earlier, we sat there, right? Earlier, brothers and sisters, we spoke on, if we will, I want to get to it. Sorry about that. Oh, here. Sorry about that. The number of farmers, right, is only 1.3 or 45,508 are black. From the U.S. Department of Agriculture, they own a mere 0.52% of America's farmland. 0% is owned by us. So, brothers and sisters, we went from working the land in, be it the West Indies or in North America or in the Southern United States, to not even having any land like that for ourselves. Brothers and sisters, when we talk on this kind of subject, this is what we're talking about. So now here we go with the list of names. All right, 70 AD Hebrew. We discussed the matter of 70 AD many times on this. All right, 1860 slave, 1900 the N-word, 1930 Negro, the other N-word, 1940 colored, 1960 black, 1980 African American. So brothers and sisters, we done went from, in less than 200 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 names of us as a people. Because as the elders say, they will call you everything but a child of God. The son of the Most High is Israel when you go to Exodus 4:22. When Malcolm X spoke and he said about the captivity 400 years, he was hinting on us being the Israelites. When Elijah Muhammad, who was the teacher of Malcolm X, when he spoke and said that the black man is like the dry bones in Ezekiel, those dry bones in Ezekiel, brothers and sisters, is the house of Israel. They knew who the children of Israel were and are. It's not a secret. Now, Deuteronomy 28, verse 43, we distinctly see this, brothers and sisters. All right. The stranger that is within thee shall get above thee very high, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. Do you know who owns the banks and loans? It ain't us. It's not us. And this prophecy here, not trying to sound like one is hating, disqualified the European Jews as being the children of Israel under these particular sad situations because they own Chase, Citibank, and these other banks that you got to go to for a loan. Is ran by the loan business by Jewish people. See, this is why Jewish people, when they talk to who they call the black, quote unquote, black Hebrew Israelites, they will sit there and say things like, "Oh, we Jewish people, we've always served Hashem, and the people that scattered wherever they scattered to, they was worshiping calves and bulls. So was Jeroboam. He worshipped a bull. That doesn't mean that you wasn't Israel. That's one of the things that European Jews try to say, that the true Israelites was worshiping idols, and that people who we are claiming to be Israel are descendants of those who was worshiping idols. But if you're not the people that Jeroboam influenced to do it, and who Manasseh, king of Judah, influenced to do it, and before them both Solomon had all the 12 tribes into it, then you can't like claim to be in these people. That's why European Jews got to substitute and have the Talmud, and which is a mixture between the Gemara and the Mishnah put together in one. You understand? They got to have these other said esoteric kind of writings, because they just can't deal strict with the Torah itself. You understand? So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to point out for edification purposes. All right. Psalms 44:14. You have made us a byword among the nations. The people shake their heads at us. Do they not sit there and shake their head at us? I can't believe them N-word people. The movie that Lawrence Fishburne was in about going into World War II, one of the lines was like basically saying, y'all N-word people don't get enough. You just want to sit there and serve with us. That kind of matter. Now, this is not disrespecting anyone who's been in the military. My father, may he rest in peace, was in Vietnam. So this is not a slander against our people and some of the things that we do that's not out and not wicked. You understand, that they feel they must do for their family, or something that's constructive or anything of that sort. But one of the things that when we are called minorities and we are landless and have language matters, not knowing what our true language is, not knowing what our true culture is, we can see when it says about awake, put on your strength. Because once you get land, once you understand your name, once you understand your culture, once you can communicate in your language, that'll give you a sense of respectful pride. That would give you a sense of saying that I am not trying to be funny against Jesse Jackson. I am somebody, and I now know who that somebody is. It's a son or it's a daughter of Yah, the creator of heaven and earth. You understand? When you read in the Willie Lynch letter, right, about a great phenomena that might alter what Willie Lynch plan was talking about, that great phenomena we as Israelites call Yah. They knew the Most High. The Europeans in slavery knew who they had captured and brought over. They would not be knighted of who they was dealing with. You understand? Let us go on, if you will, to the next slide. A matter of scattering and scattered. Let us understand that Deuteronomy 28, verse 68 starts with the word and. This means that we have seen that Israel was scattered from verse 64. Then we see the ships were used. So, brothers and sisters, as we're going to be pointing out, the ships mainly came from Western Africa. Some came from East Africa as well. All right, as been pointed out in the book From Assyria to America, part 1, that went from East Africa all the way to Manhattan. But that's another subject. Getting into this particular part, a lot of the Israelites from the era when Assyria fell fled into Western Africa. Many Israelites speak about 70 AD, but we've been fleeing into African places, as been pointed out in the Diaspora of Israel presentations on this channel, long before 70 AD. This is not to take away from 70 AD. You understand? We just want to emphasize that. Did you know that the majority of the ships went to Brazil? 30% of the slave ships went to Brazil. Did you know that in the United States, there's more black people in Gary, Indiana than there are in New York City? Did you know that there's more black people in Brazil than there are in the entire United States? So these are things, brothers and sisters, that we want to emphasize for edification purposes. In a book called From Slavery to Freedom by Franklin Moss, they estimate that as many as 5 million people brought as captives to Brazil may not have been accounted for. That as many as 5 million. Now, this book right here From Slavery to Freedom by Franklin Moss, 8th edition. That's a college reference book. That book states that as many as 5 million during the Atlantic slave trade to Brazil may not have been accounted for. This is why they don't want us reading. This is why they try to make history seem to be boring. Yeah, they quote unquote gave you Black History Month. They also gave you YouTube. They also gave you StreamYard. They also sat there and gave you Asus and other computers and cell phones. So when people try to sit there who may not know how to teach or care to teach, and who try to snap on other Israelites for respectfully trying to take advantage of quote Black History Month, well, that's what they gave you. They gave you Facebook that you inboxing people on. Zuckerberg runs that. I've been trying to, and it's not to praise oneself, I've been trying to talk to Israel about getting their own book out. Put your face on the book instead of just staying on Facebook, so we can sit there and get this information out. In the book that I wrote called Israelite History as it relates to the world, that book was released last year. I chronicled lists in that book about the statues in the Confederacy in the southern United States that they want to get rid of. Somebody has to leave a record of what's going on, how they try to erase what they did in slavery. We're going to sit there and look this up, put it down, so that way the future generations, as we're talking about J.A. Rogers, he passed away 14 years before I was born, but I'm still talking about his book. Ivan Sertima, he passed away in 2009. And as Israelites, we've been talking about Rudolph Winsor in his book, Moses Farrar in his book, Kohen Mikael in his books. So now there's nothing wrong with continuing on in the legacy of bringing out this information to the people. That's what we are trying to sit there and do for edification purposes. Did you know one of the reasons why they had in slavery what they call the slave Bible? It talks about them being enslaved in Egypt, but it doesn't talk about the Exodus. That is a severely canonized Bible. You understand? The Torah holds the record of the Israelites being enslaved in Egypt. Somebody had to record that for edification purposes. It was less than, say, 15 years ago that we as Israel began to study about the Exodus much harder. When, say, the conscious community came up and was trying to deny the Exodus, it made Israelites have to go and study what was Rorati, what is Avaris, who was Pharaoh Neferhotep, who was Pharaoh Dudimos. These things were not readily known among many Israelites. When the autonomous and or indigenous community say that this map is a lie about us coming from Africa to the Western Hemisphere, but say the Atlantic slave trade is told in reverse, it is up to us to get the information together to show what we're talking about. William Lawrence Katz, in his book called Black Indians, he spoke about the Atlantic slave trade going east and west. So we don't deny that there were indigenous and or what you would call today Black people in the Caribbean that was shipped to Spain by Columbus, by Amerigo Vespucci. That's not denied. Ivan Sertima, in his book, They Came Before Columbus, talked about the slave trade that went east. We are talking, however, about the slave trade in many cases that went west. Let those whose spirit goes into saying it went east, which is true, let them present that information. But one of the things as a brother who attempts to bring out information that I despise is when someone tries to control how one teaches. Well, what you should talk about, pause, stop, rewind, re-record. If you feel that somebody should talk about a particular subject, do it. Don't tell another brother or sister what he or she should talk about. If you feel it should be talked about, present your info. You do it. You understand? So these are things, getting back to the subject matter, that we want to point out, if we will. All right, let's go on, brothers and sisters, to the next slide. A matter of being sadly pursued. Josephus in Wars of the Jews stated that the tallest and most beautiful Titus reserved for the triumph. This triumph was to be done in Rome. Titus is also recorded as having Israelites ate by animals in arenas, like the Europeans did black babies as alligator bait, as we see right here inside of this picture on the right side. And that Israelites were by Titus made to kill each other, like the way the Fed set up the guns for Bloods and Crips. Do you know that people in Los Angeles or so were saying that they will go in alleys and just see a crate of guns just sitting in there? And they're like, how in the world did these guns just get in the hood like that? You don't think it was known by the feds that people say in Brooklyn used to go to Virginia in the 1970s and certainly the 80s and pick up guns to come back to the hood with? This is not hidden knowledge. Do you understand? So these are things that when they want to promote, such as the gun violence, the drugs, the movies like we showed earlier, like Paid in Full, and so forth and so on, these are things that they are showing. Not saying it's a lie, but it just goes to show what is being portrayed that we have contributed to the society. We want to sit there and, as it says in Isaiah 52, shake loose off the dust and put on our beautiful garments. And as it says there, awake, awake means that we have been asleep. We want to sit there and wake up out of that sleep. And then when we get that, know how to respect one another. And that's something, sadly, that the Israelite community seems, sadly, no disrespect intended, to not understand in many, many cases. You understand? Needs to sit there, know and understand, brothers and sisters, how to respect one another, the brothers and the sisters alike. Let's go on, if we will. Josephus cited. In Josephus, we see War of the Jews, that the people were sent from Egypt to Rome by ship. The Israelites were not sent from Israel, meaning Israel, the land, to Egypt. All right, so we want to, brothers and sisters, point this out for edification purposes, if we will, right? And we want to put that in black, if we will. All right, were not, brothers and sisters, not sent. And I want to put that in black. Thank you for the time. All right, for those who will watch it later, they were not sent from the land of Israel to Egypt in ships by Titus. The idea of some saying that it would be kinder for the Romans to send the people from Israel to Egypt by ship, we have to remember that the Romans were the same who fed people to animals. Did you know that the Romans used to put a man between two horses and rip them apart as a sport? So when people try to say, well, the Romans, they wouldn't sit there and do that because it would have been not as nice. The Romans were not nice. Let's go on. All right. The scattering now of the Israelites from the land of Israel to other parts can be seen. And the fact that Will Durant in his book, Caesar and Christ, that the Carthaginians were akin to the Jews of the Bible in their language had a Hebrew tone. So we want to point out our citations, as some will say online, our receipts. All right. In the book of Josephus, it says this in Wars of the Jews, book 7. So Titus took the journey he intended into Egypt and passed over the desert very suddenly and came to Alexandria and took up a resolution to go to Rome by sea. As for the leaders of the captives, Simon and John, who were of the Israelites, right, it says, with the other 700 men whom he had selected out of the rest to be eminently tall and handsome of body. So what did they do in regards with the Israelites? They who were tall and handsome. Tall, and as we know, Israel is black, tall, dark, and handsome, as they say. That is who the Romans picked to sit there and show. You know what the Romans were into. Okay, let's go on. He gave order that they should soon be carried to Italy. It goes on to say, right, sorry about that, as resolved to produce them in his triumph. So when he had a prosperous voyage to his mind, right, it said the city of Rome behaved itself in his reception, and their meeting him at a distance as it did in the case of his father. Brothers and sisters, what's that saying? Vespasian took Israelites to Rome. Titus took Israelites to Rome and showed them off in a triumph. Do you know when our people were being brought over here to the Western Hemisphere that they used to sit there and say, that's a good voyage. You did good. It really was no difference. As we were shipped to Rome, so were we shipped over here to the Western Hemisphere. Scattered into Egypt, because if you know the history about Elephantine and north of Elephantine and Alexandria, you understand? Israelites were shipped from there to Rome and then produced for the triumph, as if to say, look, this is what we got of the Ayuda, or the people of Judah. You understand? So these are things we want to emphasize for edification purposes. Let's go on. Scattered to Africa by the Romans. Now, this is a book right here, Hebrewisms of West Africa, from Jerusalem, Egypt, Elephantine, all right? Then you have Meroe, which was in Sudan, the capital of Ethiopia at one time, as opposed to Napata in history, all right? Then you have Khartoum, Kordofan, Chad, going all the way to where the Ashanti and the Yoruba and the Jukun people are. All of this right here from Jerusalem, in part with that. Then on this side, you got from Rome to from Jerusalem. So Romans came into Jerusalem, and then from Jerusalem, the people done scattered. So from Rome, the enemy came. The people who were oppressed left from Jerusalem, being gentrified, all right, and then went to Western Africa. So these are things that we want to emphasize and show what we're talking about for edification purposes. Next slide before we close out. Scattered to Africa by Assyria, then Rome to Negro land. What are we looking at? This part that you see, brothers and sisters, shown right here with the three arrows there. When you read about Kinembanu, you read that in the book I wrote, Egypt Talk and Writing. I explained that when the Assyrian Empire fell, many from the people that developed kingdom, Kinembanu, migrated later on and met up with the Israelites that left from the other part, from Rome, and formed kingdoms. You know who else confirmed that? Dr. Ben, in his book, African Origins of Major Western Civilizations. The guy, Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan, who is of the Falashas or Beta Israel people of Ethiopia, who did not like the Bible, by the way. He stated in his book, African Origins of Major Western Religions, that the Jews that fled out meant from Northern Africa to Western Africa and formed kingdoms. So even if he don't like the Bible, he definitely in his history books spoke about the diaspora of the Israelites. This is why we want to cite our citations. Then we see here, brothers and sisters, Negro land. Negro land is what, brothers and sisters, the book written by Daniel P. Mannix and William Cowley called Black Cargoes. It speaks about where the French and the English picked up slaves from the true population of Upper Guinea. You see Guinea here and Negro land. This is where many of the slaves were marched to go down to the coast. Brothers and sisters, these are things that we want to emphasize and talk about for edification purposes. All right, let's go on, brothers and sisters, to the next part. The Ethiopian Sea and the Ethiopians. Now, what we're seeing right here, brothers and sisters, right? This says Oceanus Ethiopicus, the Ethiopian Sea, which we today understand as what? Brothers and sisters, the Atlantic Ocean. The Atlantic Ocean was at one time called the Ethiopian Sea. This map dates back, brothers and sisters, to the 1700s, or that's to say the 18th century. Now, let's scroll this back up. Here it says, by 70 AD, as we was talking earlier, right? By 70 AD, there were thousands of Jews in Seleucia on the Tigris and in other Parthian cities. They were numerous in Arabia and crossed thence into Ethiopia. Brothers and sisters, huh? Jews crossed thence into Ethiopia, which is here. Did you know, brothers and sisters, that the Denagme people that you see in Ghana trace their origins to where the Falashas now reside in Gondar, Ethiopia? These are things that we're not making up, brothers and sisters. So while we're talking about, quote, Black history in what we call and said as Black History Month, want to sit there and respectfully take the time to sit there and get this pointed out to the people. All right. Here we see the Egyptians painting the Ethiopians as paying homage to them. These were the people of Nubia. Brothers and sisters, the Romans thought the Israelites came from Ethiopia/Nubia. Israel, we cannot present teachings and disavow Africa. I want to state that again. Israel, we cannot teach history and disavow Africa. Egypt is mentioned over 500 times. Ethiopia over 40, Canaan over 200, Philistines over 40. The number of Hamite, indigenous African, if you will, places mentioned exceed over 2,000 times in the Bible. That cannot be ignored when your book has over 1,500, 2,000 citations of people of another race, another ethnic background called the Hamites. And people who are not you, the Japhite or the European, mistaking the Israelites for Hamites. We cannot disavow that, brothers and sisters, and act like that does not matter. So, brothers and sisters, let us go on. As a result of the sugar factories, there are so many Negroes in the island of Hispaniola that it resembles Ethiopia itself. That, brothers and sisters, Hispaniola today is understood as Haiti in the Dominican Republic. What is that talking about, brothers and sisters, if we will? Sugar factories, Negroes, Ethiopia. We already pointed out that in this map here, it was called the Ethiopian Sea. So when we sit there and show about Negroes, and this citation, you can go into the book called Documents of West Indian History, while we talk about Black History and Black History Month by the Prime Minister of former Trinidad and Tobago. Forgot the guy's name. It slipped my mind at the moment. But I'll put it inside of the description. Eric Williams, that's his name. I'm going to type that in. The guy who wrote that book where I got that citation from is named Eric Williams. He passed away back in 1981. May he rest in peace. That's where I got that quote there. Oh, all I had to do is keep on reading my own notes. Yeah, Eric Williams. Let's go on. Next slide. All right. Let us expound upon the matter before we close out. All right. Let us expound. The true Israelites were scattered in all directions. The slaves that were brought to America are descendants of those Israelites that were dispersed into Africa many, many years ago, about 2,500 years ago. Cyrene, Israelites attempted to establish Hebrew African Empire. Roman suppression forces further Israelite migration into Africa. All right, let's expand this so we can sit there and show what we're talking about, if we will, for edification purposes. Elephantine, 600 BCE. Israelites established a garrison, 70 AD. Romans conquer and enslave over 100,000 Israelites. All right. Tamentit, 1492 CE. Ottoman Muslims destroy a 1,000-year-old Hebrew settlement. Ethiopia, 955 BCE. Menelik, son of Solomon, and the Queen of Sheba establishes an Israelite dynasty that lasted almost 3,000 years. Uganda, line of 33 kings tracing their lineage to King David. Uganda tradition. Libya, 640 CE. Israelites, Queen Dia Kahina organizes an army to defend against Roman and Arab incursions in North Africa. Let's go on. Kazembe, 1831 CE. Shemitic, meaning of Shem, Africans whose king wears a Mitri head wrap resembling that of the Israelite high priest. Mar, Rakesh, 1000 CE to 1500 CE. Hebrews allowed to practice the Torah, Islamic period. Tangier, Tangier, 1150 CE. Israelite is sanctuary established by Beni Musa, sons of Moses. Now, when you look up the thing by To the Prophet in his book, it speaks about the sons of Moses that were scattered in Africa. Kamuria, medieval Europe state north of the Senegal River. Ghana, 300 CE. Hebrew dynasty established by Za el-Yemeni, last about 1,000 years, finally known as the Songhai Empire. Brothers and sisters, let's go in. Lam, 12th century Hebrew kingdom, 1,200 miles east of Timbuktu. Niger River, circa or era or time frame of 1850 CE. 7 princes descending from the kings of ancient Israelites. Fatasi tradition. Brothers and sisters, these kinds of things, you can sit there and even look it up on your own time. These are things we are not making up because we had nothing better to do with our time, brothers and sisters. Let us know and understand that for edification purposes. Brothers and sisters, with the time allotted, we're going to close out in this presentation, giving honor and praise unto Yah, the creator and the maker of heaven and earth. Tune in so-called Thursday night, 2 nights from now, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on this channel. And subscribe to the channel, leave your comment. If you dislike it, please leave in the comment section why you dislike it out of respect. All right. Open to constructive criticism and so forth. All right. So again, brothers and sisters, thank you for the time. Creator bless you. With the time allotted, we're going to close out this presentation and pick it up, brothers and sisters, 2 nights from now, so-called Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, on the same channel. Subscribe to the channel. Mori Yeshaya Torah Lessons. Most I bless. Shalom.